Welcome back, Next Gen fam, to another edition of Mentor Moments. Today, I am joined by the wonderful Cory Treffiletti. Cory is the global head of marketing for WebEx.com and the global head of demand generation for Cisco Collaboration. Cory, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. Looking forward to it.
Cannot wait. Well, we're going to dive right in. We're going to get you on your toes right away with some rapid fire questions, let the people get to know you a little bit better. So we're going to try to stick these to like one sentence, one word, perhaps, if you can. But we'll start with something easy. What is one book that you would recommend everybody read?
The book is called The CMO Manifesto by John Ellett. It's a great book to help you understand as a marketer, or if you're just looking at marketing, what are the things you got to ask about?
Definitely one I will have to add to my list. Your next rapid fire question: what is one wellness tip that you would give everyone?
I would say the one thing you should do every now and then, just get up and walk around. Whether it's walk outside. I prefer walking outside and getting a little bit of sunlight, but you got to get up and walk around because your brain works better when you're walking around.
I think that's a great one, especially now when we're all kind of like trapped inside and you don't even get the commute to work anymore. You have to make sure you find that time.
Yes, it can be difficult to find that time.
I could not agree more. Next in your list of rapid fire questions, talk us through your morning routine. Any tips, any habits that you have in there that would be great little tidbits for people?
My morning routine changed a lot pre-COVID and during COVID. Pre-COVID, I would get up at 4:30 or 5. I would work out and I would drive to work, and then I would get a bunch of stuff done before anybody showed up. These days, I don't have the need to get up at 4:30. I get up more like 5:30, 6 o'clock. And I usually check my email, make sure that I've got a hold on what's happening, that there's no fires that I'm going to anticipate. Then I work out and then I get into my day. So usually I'm sitting here still about an hour before everybody else does. But I like making sure that I have a clean understanding of what the day's going to look like before everybody else chimes in.
I think it's a great insight, being able to have that moment to, set yourself up for success for the day rather than just jumping in, rolling out of bed, being like, all right, time to, see whatever is kind of in front of me. I think setting yourself up, being able
the worst feeling is feeling like you're behind by 9 o'clock.
Great tidbit. And then your final rapid fire question, and you will have passed the test. What is one productivity hack that you have to keep you on your toes throughout the day?
I don't know if it's necessarily a hack per se, but I book, and this is a couple of people have told me to do this. I book 6 hours every week during work hours to think. And so there's 6 hours. They are flexible. You have to be willing to have them move around. And they're typically either 1 or 2 hour blocks, but they move around during the course of the week. But I make sure that there's 6 hours of me just being able to think, meaning I can't be on a call. I can't be in a meeting. It could be sitting and doing my to-do list. It could be just contemplating a topic or a challenge that we need to hit. But it's me being able to sit around and think about things that are important.
Wow. We're like 4 minutes in and I already have like 8 different things that I feel like I can go do now. I think it's an excellent piece of advice, and not a lot of people are actually thinking about it that way. They're saying, I have to do. I just have to, especially as entrepreneurs, you're like, I have to get to the next stage. I have to keep growing my business. How do I don't have time to think, I just have to keep doing. So I think that tidbit of being able to say, yeah, you need to schedule that time so that you can actually think about what it is that you need to do. Already we're getting great pieces of information right off the bat. So thank you, Cory. You made it through the rapid fire round. Now we can get into a little bit more of the fun stuff, some of the meat, the juice here. As the global head of marketing for WebEx, I think people definitely want to know, how have things changed since the pandemic started? Obviously, definitely a different level of demand, I'm sure, since the onset. But how has kind of your day-to-day and your team's day-to-day changed, and how have you adapted during this time?
Well, being the fact that we do work literally on WebEx, trying to get people to understand how to use the product, we were pretty used to this concept already. And what I found really interesting was that overnight, the entire world basically had to catch up. The entire world was forced to think about how they were going to work remotely and collaborate from a distance. And what's been interesting is that a lot of people, they jumped on one platform or another. And prior to COVID, WebEx was by far and away the leading platform. And it still is. Now, there's a lot of other companies that may come to mind. When it comes to the business world, WebEx is still the leading platform by almost 2 to 1 still.
Wow.
And what has been interesting during this period of time is that people typically make decisions based on behavior and instinct. So they all jump onto a certain platform or they jump into a certain solution. And then over time, they realize what's important to them. And what we've found is that while a lot of people may have bounced around at the beginning of COVID, people are now settling on things like security. They're now settling on things like ease of use. They're now settling on things like the ability to connect to devices and other elements. And we're seeing a lot of people come back into WebEx now and continue to increase that differentiation from some of the other players because they can't easily do that with other tools. And the big thing is the security. And I've heard so many horror stories, and so many horror stories. And those are things that the WebEx team had already thought about and built for. And people didn't know these were things that were going to be important for them. It's kind of like when you buy a car. You might buy a car based on a couple of initial criteria, but eventually over time you realize there's some stuff that I really wish I had that I don't have with this car. So eventually you go buy a new car. And I see a lot of people doing that same kind of thing right now.
Super, super interesting. Building off. How do you see kind of things going into the future a little bit? You know, obviously we were chatting before this, we're probably stuck here for, you know, a decent amount of time, but as things maybe start to normalize or people start to go back in, how do you envision this product use kind of continuing and, you know, kind of leveraging these new elements here, the lessons that you guys have learned along the way?
Well, as everybody kicked into that overnight need to work from home, what it has done is it's elevated the concept of being able to work remotely, and companies who may have been afraid of this in the past are no longer afraid of it. So even when this is all over, and that could easily be another year, but when this is all over, people are going to be back into this hybrid environment and they're going to be okay with it, where you'll have some people that just work from home maybe 2 or 3 days a week, maybe even 4. Some people will work all the time. Some people will want to go back into an office full time. I don't know that it's going to be a requirement for most companies to be there full time, but I do think that people are going to want to have that balance, that hybrid approach. And so what we're seeing now is a lot of the stories that we go tell, a lot of the messaging that we push out into the market, a lot of how we work with other companies and how we interact with customers. It's about what that hybrid is going to look like. And for a lot of people that you're talking to, as they continue to build a business or build an idea and build a company, they're going to have to anticipate and plan for that. So I know a bunch of entrepreneurs who've decided we're just going to go remote. We're not going to take on the $35,000 a month for an office. And that's going to increase our ability to control our own destiny. And I think that's a really unique place to be, especially from an entrepreneurial perspective.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating. And I know on our end too, we're actively in those discussions of what does, you know, hybrid office / work from home look like? You know, do we gather maybe once a month or, you know, once a week or whatever it may be?
I'll tell you one interesting along that is that I have a friend who has an agency and they're just making the decision to get rid of both their offices. And in doing so, they have a massive savings. They're 150 people and they have a massive savings. And with that savings, one of the things he's talking about is doing a 3-week offsite once a year where he can bring everybody to an island. He can bring everybody to Hawaii. He can bring everybody together and do full-on strategic sessions in a remote location, bring them to a ranch in Montana and have it be a total opportunity to build culture. And it's still significantly cheaper than having an office.
And sounds a lot more fun.
Absolutely. Build better relationships inside the company that way.
Definitely. Switching gears a little bit and stepping a little bit away, you know, from the WebEx side of things. Before joining Cisco, you were working at another company that was actually acquired by Cisco. And you know, as we were talking before this, I was like, yeah, you did that twice. You know, you had Blue Kai that ended up being bought by Oracle. And you mentioned to me that you've actually done it 6 times. You've sold 6 companies, 3 of which you've stayed on. You know, you're kind of talking to an audience of entrepreneurs that everybody's like, oh, I want that exit moment. And I think, you know, 2 things to maybe ask you here about what is it like to actually go through that exit? And then what is it like to actually stay on and work for the company that you were acquired by?
Well, I've been lucky. So I have had 6. I'm 6 for 8 at this point. And it is a lot to do with the timing and the people and the product. There's so many different elements that factor into it. But what's fun about it is that you can see your vision come to a head and you have that fork in the road, that decision that has to be made at that point, which is, do you continue to try to do it on your own, or do you think that it makes more sense to go do it with a partner? And in those situations where we decided to do it with a partner, it's very fulfilling because it does feel like you've accomplished something. But the decision to stay, you have to look at that as in two ways. And this is exactly how I looked at it. I've looked at every opportunity as a challenge for me to be successful in a new environment. And in the most recent two, where we sold one company to Oracle and one company to Cisco, in both of them, I looked at it as a great opportunity to say, how can I be successful applying what I know in a very, very different type of an environment? And so, on one side of things, it was how do you go into a company like Oracle and teach them about how to utilize data and how they understand an ecosystem of businesses they've never dealt with before. Inside of a company like Cisco, it's how do I apply the things that I know from building a SaaS business? And how do you apply that into the growth of a business that most people are already kind of aware of? How do you revamp and re-energize, if you will, their go-to-market motions? And so for me, I like those challenges. It's the same if you go into starting a new business, there's a set of challenges that you like. If you join a company that's already been around there for a few years, they're hiring you because they have a set of challenges you want to provide a solution for. And when you get acquired, you look at the opportunity and say, well, this is completely different. How do I make my mark in that environment? So if you look at it from that perspective, you're successful. I will tell you on the flip side where you fall down though. And I've seen this a lot, which is companies will buy you. And then you come in with your chest all puffed out and with the expert perspective that you know how to do everything and they need to listen to you. We got bought by a company called Oracle and a company called Cisco, both of which do 30 million, 80 million in revenue, 80 billion in revenue. I can't walk into a business that does 30 billion in revenue and tell them that I'm smarter than them. That's just dumb. So you have to really look at how do you identify a challenge, and then how do you check your ego? How do you look at it as this is an opportunity for me to learn? Everything is an opportunity for me to learn. I may have something to teach, but I'm going to start with the perspective, I have some things to learn. And no matter where you are and what career you're at and what age or experience level you're at, you always have something new to learn. So you have to think about it that way.
I think super wise and super thought out. And I think, definitely not the answer I was expecting, but I'm loving it. I think you're right. Yeah. You can't go in and say, oh, I know everything. And, you should listen to me. You guys bought me. Clearly you need me. But I think, being able to take that step back and better understand and kind of roll with this new environment is a huge, huge lesson.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I've been in these acquisitions where we bought companies. When we were at Oracle, we bought 4 other companies. And I've seen people come in, guns blazing, and they're sitting there telling you, well, you guys need to learn from me now. You don't make very many friends that way. And in these big companies, relationships are key to your success because relationships imply that they like you and they want to hear from you. If they don't want to hear from you, you get shut down. You're out soon.
Yeah. Yeah. On that vein, you've kind of run marketing initiatives at both, some of the smaller startup level orgs and also some of these giant, like you said, 80 billion in ARR, companies. What's maybe one key distinction that you notice in kind of how you, even manage your team in those different environments, or how you kind of go about getting things approved? I feel like there's definitely a bunch of key differences there that you can shed some light on.
From my perspective, I never approach how I build and manage a team any differently in a big organization or a small organization. I think you have to take into context that the world around you will be different. In a large organization, there's definitely bureaucracy, and there are definitely hurdles to being able to get things done in a nimble, agile, quick fashion. Once again, if you approach it from the perspective of this is all broke and I'm here to fix it, you're not going to be successful in a large organization. And in a small organization, to be honest with you, nobody wants you to have that attitude either. Now, they may ask you, hey, we think our systems are broke. Can you help us fix it? Now you've been invited into that conversation with that perspective. That's a better place to be. If you come in guns blazing in a small org or in a large org, you turn off a lot of people. So one of the benefits in the last 10 years I've had is I've been around people whose egos, while they were there and they were present and they were strong, they always check their egos in favor of data and intelligence. Even these days, I tell people, if you don't have data to back up a decision, don't make the decision. Now, you can go with your gut and you can go counter to what the data says, but you got to have a reason for why. And so in a small org or in a large org, I've always tried to get my people to think from that perspective. Like, you got to have some data that has support and rationale behind a decision to be made. And then from my perspective, I try to make sure everybody is very transparent. I make sure that everybody wants to work together. I make sure that they are inclusive of the other groups inside the organization. If you do those things, whether it's a big or a small org, typically everybody's enjoys working with you, and then you build those relationships, and then they're going to continue to do things with you.
I love it. Kind of building off you mentioned one thing about data and the importance of using data to make decisions. And as I was kind of preparing for this, I saw that you talk a lot about data meets storytelling, which I feel like those are two buzzwords now that are very prevalent, but you were talking about it way back 10 plus years ago, kind of before, where you had data on one side and storytelling on another. And now obviously the convergence is a lot more relevant in our current time. Talk to us a little bit about this idea of data and storytelling and how you first embarked on this concept.
So it was a concept, I didn't formulate it well until about 10 years ago. I had been using it prior. And what it basically is, it's a really simple model. It's 3 steps. You have data in, value creation, and data out. And it's an easy model for me when I like easy, because I'm not smart enough to go with the complicated stuff. I like easy because what it does is it allows me to have a construct to use. So what it means is that data in is before you want to come up with an idea, go look at the information that's there, figure out how to structure data, understand what signals are important, separate them from the noise, and then look at them and put them in a format where people around you can understand them. Then you look at them and you create hypotheses, and this is the value creation. That could mean, what's the narrative we want to go out? What's the story we want to go out and tell? What's the messaging we want to push into market? What are the things that you can do? What are the levers that you can pull and the buttons that you push in a business to create value in that business? And that could be the development of a demand gen sequence to get customers in the front door. It could be developing nurtures to onboard people and get them to be stickier. It could be inspiring them, whatever it might be. In this case, we'll talk about the story. And then the data out is the execution of that. So putting the story in market. So developing go-to-market campaigns, putting it out there, whether it's through advertising or it's earned media and general marketing, maybe it's events, whatever it might be. Once you have it out there, it creates the feedback loop that it creates more data, which comes back into the cycle. So the idea is that you can identify with the data in, who is the audience, what makes them tick, what gets them over the hump to maybe try your product or your service. Now that you understand the insights about who they are, let's develop a story. And that story is going to be very benefit oriented, very customer centric, and it's going to be something that you can then apply some creative vision to. So you're not going to just go with a very product oriented, benefit oriented story. You're going to add some flair to it. You're going to add some excitement to it and let that creativity flourish. Then you go test it. You go put it into market, and you don't have to commit to 6 months of that market message being out there. You can look at it for 3 or 4 weeks, and then you can continue to tweak it and you can continue to refine it. And once you've found that fit where it really starts to resonate and the floodgates are open and people are coming in the front door, then you blow it out. And so that's the model that I've applied everywhere, and it seems to work very well.
I don't know why you say you like easy because you're not smart. You're definitely a super intelligent person. I mean, that's an incredible system, and one that I definitely need to go back, be able to watch this again, so I can, and luckily I get to, so that I can, kind of hone in on those learnings. I think that there's a lot of really powerful stuff there for everyone.
Nice.
So somehow we made it to close to the end of our time here. I don't know how this happened so quickly, but before we jump off, one question I love to finish with is, Cory, what excites you about the next generation? Obviously, there's a lot of stuff moving right now. Our world is in a super interesting time. Definitely different areas that need attention as we kind of go into this next little bit of our human existence here. But from your perspective, what excites you?
I think what's interesting is that I like it when new groups of people come along and they have no desire to do things the way that they were done before. One of the most painful things when you enter into an organization is you ask someone why you're doing something, and they say, well, that's the way we've always done it. That sucks. That's the single worst killer of culture and morale. So for me, when you have new people come into an organization and new generations that come along, it's an implied element that you're going to question things from a different perspective. You're going to come at it with a different potential solve, and you're going to try to challenge things in a new and interesting way. And I think what happens is a lot of the newer generations entering the workforce and entering with ideas, they tend to get a bad rap. they tend to get the idea that, well, this isn't how we're going to do stuff. We're going to do completely different ways of approach to the business, et cetera. And that word millennial and all this kind of stuff gets thrown around. And I think it's an oversimplification and an overgeneralization that people don't need. I love the fact that people want to question things from a new perspective. And what I always ask is question away, but understand where we started first, then question from there. Like, you've got to understand what came before you. It's why we all went through school. It's why we all took history classes. You have to understand what came before and then question from an educated perspective. Don't question from a perspective of, I'm just here to break things. I'm here to disrupt things. Like, disruption is a wonderful concept, but disruption comes from education. So I love when these new generations of people come in, they're highly educated, and they've thought things through rather than just spoken from the hip. That makes me very, very happy.
I think a great closing soundbite from you is question from an educated perspective. I think that's a great piece of advice. Cory, thank you so much for joining us today. Absolute pleasure. I can't wait for everyone to be able to check this out.
I had a lot of fun. Thank you.